Hey, we're back with part 2 of coping with guilt. And let me just say that if you are struggling with guilt as a caregiver, chances are, in fact, I'm pretty certain that you are a very dedicated and loving caregiver who's trying to do your best. Because often we feel guilt because we're not measuring up to our own expectations. And my experience has been, as a social worker, when I would have to go in, sometimes even call in adult protective services for those heartbreaking cases where sometimes patients would have, awful bed sores and just, I don't even want to get into the details, but neglect, physical abuse, emotional abuse. Those caregivers don't feel guilt, which blows my mind. I would just want to slap some sense in them, shake them, and say, how can you not feel guilty? But they're just not wired that way. That compassionate, empathetic component is missing. So if you're wrestling with guilt, obviously that was an extreme example, but it's because you're trying to do your best and you're an attentive, caring caregiver. So I just want to put that out there first. And secondly, I just wanted to talk about 2 of the main reasons that caregivers have shared with me that they feel guilt. And this comes up a lot in support groups. The first one is, I feel guilty that I can't take care of my loved one 24/7. And the second one is, I feel guilty that I just wish this would be over, which subsequently means they wish their loved one would die. And nobody wants to be heard saying those words because that sounds cold. So I just want to address both of these. First of all, the guilt over whether you're sending your loved one to an adult daycare during the day, hiring sitters, skilled nursing care. Those decisions are hard. They are heartbreaking. There are a dozen scenarios where being in a skilled facility 24/7 is the best option. Sometimes it's the best safety option. Sometimes that closest loved one who's the caregiver has their own health issues going on. Sometimes it's a younger couple taking care of a parent or grandparent and they have small children in the home, and that patient, the person with Alzheimer's, is just maybe violent or at least verbally abusive, just uncooperative. Anyway, I'm not going to ramble on, but there are a lot of reasons that I know that situation is not as manageable as what mine is. I also know some of y'all are caring 24/7 and you wish you had the resources to place your loved one, and maybe we can address those at a different time. And sometimes there's just no good answer. I don't want to make it sound easier than it is. But what I do know, 100% sure, is that if you are loving your person 24/7, you are a full-time caregiver. If you are caring about them, even if you're not physically caring for their needs 24/7, you are a dedicated caregiver. If you are even a long-distance caregiver, but you are calling to check on them, you make sure that other people are visiting, if you're advocating for them from afar, you in some ways have as much or more stress than those of us who are in the home, because you're having to trust that people are being honest with you, and that's a whole different level of stress. So please know there is no reason to feel guilt. And I know, again, I can tell you that, but you have to let go of that yourself. Just know if you're making sure they are cared for and you are loving them, you're doing the best you can, and there is no reason for guilt. Secondly, wishing this would be over. I mean, I have those thoughts now, and we're in the early stages where I am savoring the time with my mom, trying to hold tight to those balloons that I keep alluding to. But sometimes I just think, I hope this doesn't, I know, y'all, this is going to sound evil. If this drags on for 10 years, I don't want to say, when am I going to get my life back? That sounds so cold, because I love my mom, and I love spending time with her, but I am just being as transparent as I can. So if you're wishing that it would be over, just know that even though some people won't share that, and let me tell you, especially with hospice when it gets towards the end, and I think for all of us that would be more understandable, a lot of times people won't verbalize those words when I ask them what they're struggling with. They won't say, I just wish they would die. Sometimes I try to pull the words out, and sometimes I just say it for them. Do you wish that they would just go ahead and die? And this may be not, when the person's imminent, but earlier, in that process. And I don't mean to say that flippantly, but I think it's okay to recognize it's not that we want their life to be over. We just do not want their dying to be prolonged. And I know that's very subjective. You know, when does a person stop living and when do they start dying? But for me, again, it's very subjective. But once a person starts dying, nobody wants a long death. So we should never feel guilty for wanting that end to be very quick and sudden and humane, and just so that person, even if they're not in pain or struggling, just not to linger. You know, who wouldn't want to be released from a broken body and a fractured mind to be well and whole and in heaven? So just know there is no guilt for having those feelings. And even if you're wishing it, if you're just now embarking on this, maybe your world has been turned upside down with a new diagnosis, it's very normal to think, I just want this to go fast. And there can be that element of dread with that. And please feel free to reach out to me, private message me or email, because that's a very hard place to be. But just know, if you're feeling those things, it's very normal, and you should not feel guilt about it, because if your loved one didn't have, this horrid disease of Alzheimer's, it's not that you would want their life to end or for, to be short. No, it's because you're compassionate and you don't want their suffering to linger. So I hope that helps any of y'all who are struggling with guilt. I know there are a lot of other reasons to feel guilt, like I alluded to before, I just didn't measure up today, or oh my goodness, I lost my patience, or whatever. But again, we have to let go of that so we can hold on tight to those balloons, because we cannot enjoy the time we have left with them, making new memories, and just, getting about our job of living. We can't do that well if we're so burdened and wrapped up in guilt. So I'm begging you, and I'm telling myself, we've got to let go of that so we can make room for all of the positive and, stay grounded in that. I hope that helps somebody today. Until next time.